So for this video, we're going to discuss very brief functional behavior assessments, and I'd like to just highlight the continuum of functional behavior assessment as it relates to RTI, and our focus will be on Tier 2 because this is our class for Tier 2, but matching the level of need based on function. We've got two articles that I've provided for this week, one by Catherine Bradshaw, the other by Patty Hirschfeld. And both of them basically discuss matching the level of need to the level of support and service. For example, if we have a student who's exhibiting low-level behaviors, although they may be disruptive, we may not have to do a costly assessment, costly in time, costly sometimes districts will pay behavioral consultants to come in and do FBAs when you can kind of figure it out pretty quickly. So we're just going to be looking for antecedents and consequences. We've got the ABC model, antecedent behavior consequence. You've probably seen this before, but we know that antecedents are triggers or setting events that predict behavior. And then a consequence might contribute to the maintenance of that behavior. So while we are discussing with teachers, what a behavior looks like, we have to really look at the topography or what the behavior really looks like and whittle it down to an operationalized definition. So for example, a teacher might say, the student's really aggressive. Well, what does that look like? Maybe he's being aggressive, verbally aggressive, maybe he's being physically aggressive. Tell me what that looks like. Give me examples. And then we can better be able to figure out the function after we've gathered some data to determine the antecedent and the consequence for behaviors. And then from that, we can form a hypothesis, and it should answer under what conditions is the behavior most likely to occur and what is reinforcing the behavior. So here are some common functions that behaviors serve, and these are things that happen after the behavior that might maintain or punish or reinforce behavior. So we're looking up top at the problem behavior, and most behaviors are to either obtain or get something or escape or avoid something. So for instance, if they're trying to obtain something, it could be social, it could be stimulation, or it could be tangible or an activity. And then if it is social interaction that the student is trying to obtain, is it adult or peer interaction? And on the other side of it, it could also be to avoid social interaction between adult or peer. So let's see. This is to engage in behaviors to increase support. So we look at our three-tiered model of support necessary for teams. And this is just kind of a nice visual for us to kind of look at the functional thinking. And function is really essential at each level, and as we go through, it increases and intensifies. Data is really critical for Tier 2 teams to match the function, whether that's direct observations or interviews. It really helps us to figure out when and where there are patterns in behaviors, and then we're able to match the function. So once we're able to figure out the function or the reason behind behavior, we're able to kind of pair up an intervention, whether that's check in, check out, especially for students who are seeking especially adult interaction and positive praise. So we try that for a few weeks and say it's working or it's not working. If it's not working, we could do a brief FBA and revisit maybe a different intervention or beef up the intervention that we already have in place and go through that cycle. And if it's still not working, we could then go into a more complex FBA at the Tier 3 level. But this is just kind of a visual for us to conceptualize that. Okay, so here's the 3 steps for functional behavior assessment. So first you describe the problem behavior. Form an operational definition of the behavior. So the targeted behavior, exactly really describe what's going on. So then you look at what data and information have you gathered about behavior. When does it occur? What might happen right before the behavior, so you're looking for antecedents, and what might happen directly after the behavior occurs, so that's the consequence. Do you see any patterns? And if you do see patterns, you can form a hypothesis about why the student may be exhibiting the problem behavior. And they typically occur for a limited number of reasons, but what do you hypothesize is the reason that the student is demonstrating this? So from there, you can develop a plan to help support the student, whether the student is trying to access attention or avoid a task or interaction. So then you can develop a plan. And then ideally, what would you like the student to demonstrate? So this is kind of like your goal for this plan, okay? And then, of course, down at the bottom, your progress monitoring. You're reevaluating and determining an exit plan for this intervention. So here we have some function-based thinking, the model for implementing function-based thinking. So we've got the behavior of concern in mind. So, for example, calling out or disrupting or being distracted or on task. So you first want to collect data to analyze when is this occurring, how often. A lot of times I hear teachers say, oh, it happens all the time. Well, what do you consider as all the time? We need some concrete numbers here. What happens right before and what happens after? And then what is the teacher's perception of the function? Because a lot of the times teachers have a really good idea of what they want. Parents and teachers alike both usually know what the student is trying to access. So from there, we can kind of use that data to answer, is the student exhibiting this behavior to access something or avoid something? And then if so, what could we teach as a replacement behavior? What could the student do instead? And you build a plan around that to address this. So functional relationships are best determined by observing patterns in behavior over time. That really means that we're going to have to do some data collection, and it's going to take a little bit of time to figure this out. However, sometimes we can go into a classroom and I can figure out the function of the behavior within 20 minutes, and you can kind of manipulate that behavior and turn it on and off by doing certain things. And that's pretty rare, but we do need to collect some data around this to see those patterns over time. A lot of times triggers in the environment, often we don't really see the connections. So we have to really put some emphasis on data. Okay, so group-based contingency programs can be used to obtain adult and peer interactions to teach appropriate social behaviors, reinforce appropriate behaviors, and enhance homeschool communication. So here's just a question for you to ponder. I don't need an answer for this, but just start thinking about, why do these programs work for externalizing attention-maintained behaviors? Conversely, when we look at avoidance or escape maintained behaviors, such as passing with response costs, taking a break, behavioral contracting with goal setting, why do these programs work for externalizing avoidance or escape maintained behaviors? So just a couple of questions just for you to think about. And then here at the end, we're looking at some really good references for Tier 2 programs. And you can look at these at your leisure, and I will have this PowerPoint available in the content folder right on Blackboard. So as always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me or use the thread in the discussion folder to ask questions. But these are all evidence-based Tier 2 programs that you can take a look at and see if they fit the needs of your school. Thank you very much.